Sure.
Hi, Nicholas. How are you? Good to see you.
Ready? It's open.
May I just say, of course. There's Felton. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
This business meeting of the Board of Education of the Cleveland Municipal School District will come to order. Mr. Ritchie, can you please call the roll?
I'd be happy to. Ms. Bingham?
Here.
Mr. Hurd?
Here.
Ms. Dempsey?
Yes.
Ms. Ellicott?
Here.
Ms. Link? Here. Dr. Schroeder? Here. Dr. Thomas?
Here.
Ms. Valdez?
Here.
8 present, represents a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. I would ask everyone who's able to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. The chair will now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the board work session from June 14th, 2022.
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. The minutes are approved. And is Julie Beers here still? There she is. I'd like to introduce Julie Beers, who's the principal of Campus International. Thank you for having us here for our final meeting of this school year. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank
Sorry,
you.
it's all yours.
Good evening and welcome to Campus International School. The end of the school year is always a time for reflection, time to finally get to just sit and breathe and think about all that can be celebrated. Our celebrations are many, and each event seemed even more special this year because we could be in person. First ever volleyball team, grades 3 and 4 Disney musical Frozen, orchestra and band performing and winning trophies at Cedar Point, our famous holiday shop where students created business plans and upcycle and create homemade treasures to sell. 20% of their profits go to a charity of their choice. This year, the entrepreneurs chose Mr. Albright, our PE teacher's family, to donate the money to, whose son was battling cancer. So many concerts, too many to count, but all amazing. 320 band and orchestra kids in grades 4 through 8, another 90 on the recorder, and close to 100 students in the choir. Dancing classrooms, no competition this year. We were bummed, we like to win. 30 students from Wales spending a week immersed in our school culture and enjoying our great city. Field trips to the film festival, Playhouse Square, a Maltz Museum, Edgewater for beach cleanup, Nature Center, Science Center, Art Museum, History Museum, walking field trips and exploring the great campus of CSU, just to name a few. Model UN, grade 8 trip to DC, grade 5 exhibition culminating project as they left 5th grade primary years program and entering the middle years program. Community projects by our grade 8 students that were more impressive than ever. But by far, the greatest celebration and the greatest moment of my career was during our 8th grade promotion. The students asked the adults, one of them, Miss Brady Lorick, their ELA teacher, if they could be totally in charge of the night. They would choose the speakers, the songs, the format. The whole evening exemplified the profile of the graduate. They were creative. They were collaborators, they were problem solvers, but most importantly, they exhibited empathy. I want to show you what I mean. I would like to introduce to you Asaleh Jones and Yasmin Abdul-Wasi, who wrote a poem for their promotion that evening that they'll share with you tonight.
This poem is titled, In This Moment. We are so blessed to be here. Claps and cheers rain, smiles upon each face, satisfied with the perseverance and hard work put in just to get to this moment.
In this moment, as the day descends, we thank the hands that grasp the balloons used for celebration. But in other moments, those same balloons were released into the sky to recognize the lives that have been lost. In this moment, we thank the hands that grasp the roses, waiting to be held to congratulate. But in other moments, tears drip on those same roses as families lay them on caskets and tombstones. While we are being congratulated, those families are mourning the death of those lives who will never get to stand on that stage, hear the claps and cheers rain, feel a sense of pride for graduation, and never receive those congratulations.
Those parents sent their kids to school in hope that their child would come back with an exciting story to tell about how their day was, how they got the question right to the answer on the board, how climbing the monkey bars is no longer an obstacle for them because today they made it all the way across. Instead, a phone call was received that their baby stopped breathing, a bullet froze their heart. How can they climb the monkey bars now or get the answer right on the board or tell you how exciting their day was at school, about how today was one of the best days ever?
In this moment, it is incumbent of us that we lead this new age in a direction that provides a sacred space for the generations to come. We must set the stake high and never let it subside. We must prove to our parents, our nurturers, that we are ready to pursue this world head first, that we are ready to make our impression on the world. As we step into a path of the unknown, let us remind ourselves of the vision and aim we have set for our futures.
So in this moment, let us bestow our condolences to the parents who won't get to witness their kids on the stage, who will never get to wipe off their tears or hear their laughs and see their smiles that made them proud.
In this moment, let us thank our parents for not only providing guidance and strength, but being our motivation to move forward. Going up on the stage and seeing your smiles made all of this worth it.
And to the teachers who provided their patience, even when we were at our worst, I thank you for putting in the time and effort for being there to watch us persevere. While we receive these certificates for graduation, we recognize the parents who can no longer hold their children. So today, hug your loved ones a little bit tighter.
In this moment, we will honor the 19 kids whose lives were stolen by a man whose heart was full of hate. The angels who suffered for 90 minutes before police would open the door.
For the parents who received that excruciating call, for the parents who will never see their babies again, their hearts broken and shattered, disregarded for the sake of another.
We should use this moment to spread gratitude, to spread peace and kindness, because this has to be the last school shooting.
The moment will come where we will be your doctors,
Attorneys,
judges,
your mayors,
teachers,
caretakers,
and the future leaders of our nation.
and to the graduates of 2026, time is of the essence. It is up to us to be the change that we want to see in the world. Be the change you want to see. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we're counting on you, and we agree with you. And I'm happy now that I don't have to talk anymore, and I can turn this over to Mr. Gordon for his CEO report.
Thank you. Good evening, board members and members of the public, and to our two speakers. You couldn't have known, but I have shared my incredible optimism for where this country is going to head when you get the reins. We're counting on you, as the chair said. You know, as people have talked about the challenging times we're in right now, I've said just wait, because I hear and see our students in many ways every day waiting their turn to fix the wrongs that we're seeing and make the rights. So congratulations to both of you and to your entire campus that I know you represent. Let's give them another round of applause. Incredible. This evening, I'd like to share a brief presentation on an important report that was released a couple of weeks ago called the Education Forward Report. I have print copies of this for board members here. I do not have the print copies for the public because they are actually still being produced, but I did put the electronic version of the report on the board docs so anyone can download it. There's also a website with it, as well as the brief slides that I plan to show. And I know with the beautiful sunlight we're having, it's going to be a little hard to see, but I just want to briefly highlight what this report says. So this report was commissioned by the Cleveland Foundation along with a number of community partners looking at what progress has been made in education from pre-K all the way to post-secondary education, the disruption of the pandemic itself, and then a recommendation for short and long-term recovery for our community. And community is bigger than the district, although obviously we're one important part of that. These are selected slides from the more formal public release. And I'm going to move quickly through many of them just to give you a sense of what's available here. Focus more obviously on the K-12 portion, which is more directly related to us. So again, this is excerpts. The entire report, along with a number of videos and other content, is available at the website educationforcle.org. So you can find this report and more information there. And the report, as I said, looked at early childhood first, looking at findings and recommendations. And so the way it's oriented is you get a couple of data points about progress made over time, which is also outlined in the report. So here, the number of high-quality preschool seats that have been generated over time and the number that have been filled. Also looking at enrollment versus capacity and how many more kids we were serving up into the pandemic. And then seeing the impact of the pandemic, in this case, losing 21% of our enrollment, and then only regaining about 8% of that enrollment. And not in just CMSD, but in the early childhood space across the community, high quality public and private early childhood. The report then identifies kind of critical elements that were impacted in this particular community. So you can see here the increased expenses along with loss of income, the incredible staff turnover and stress. Early childhood outside of the public sector is one of the most underpaid roles in our community, and so many of these teachers who have been well trained in these classrooms can actually make more money working fast food than they can actually working as an early childhood educator. And then the additional behavioral issues that we're seeing, the mental health and behavioral health issues in the early childhood classrooms. The report then narrates both short-term and long-term recommendations. And so again, here's an example from early childhood of ensuring that we get those federal dollars to really reopen and stabilize the early childhood system, working on the staffing shortage and resource needs, and really working on the outreach to get families back engaged. So I'm going to use this just to orient the report. Again, I know I moved fairly quickly through that because that's not particularly our space, but just to orient you to how the entire report's laid out. Each section then finally ends with long-term focus. And so here you can see it's about the advocacy to really right the ship in the early childhood space, making it affordable, high quality, having a birth to 3 strategy, what happens before 3 and 4-year-old preschool, and having a federal advocacy agenda to make sure that we have universal, high quality early childhood education. For us, obviously the K-12 findings are particularly relevant. And so just as a sample of what's in the report highlights the significant progress we made over the last 12 years now in improving graduation rates compared to the red dotted line, which is the state average. And you can see the yellow line where we've been closing the gap with a 21 percentage point gain up to our 80.1% compared to the state's 87.2%. You can also see that we were really making good gains on pre-pandemic reducing chronic absenteeism. We've been putting a lot of effort into that space with our Get to School You Can Make It campaign and other efforts, but that when the pandemic hit, we saw nearly doubling of chronic absenteeism, and that at the, as we've returned, the attendance has not returned to anything close to pre-pandemic. It actually looks much more like the pandemic shutdown data. Also, the impact on enrollment, where we lost nearly 3,000 kids. We've gained back about 1,500 of those kids, but also have a number that just didn't come back, many who went directly into the workforce, many who moved out of the city, and so the COVID impact here on enrollment. And then just things we know that we've been addressing over the last year, the unmet basic needs, thinking about all of the food. I am very pleased that President Biden just signed a act that will extend the USDA waivers that Mr. Burkhart, who actually serves on a national nutrition organization, and our council members, Council of the Great City Schools, both advocated for. So that's great news to continue to provide flexible options for feeding kids and families. Also, the incredible mental health challenges we're facing in a system that has very few resources to begin with, and another under-resourced system. And then finally, the digital divide. We have, as a school district with Mr. Timmons and our IT team and our family engagement team, permanently connected a little over 6,000 homes, or a little over 12,000 students. We're keeping others connected through hotspots and other more temporary solutions, but we haven't solved the digital divide problem that exists in Cleveland, and we've hit a ceiling because we did this largely by sending modems to homes that can plug the modem in because it's connected to the infrastructure. We're out of those homes. We just have homes that are not connected to that infrastructure, let alone the underserved homes where the internet exists, but it's not robust enough or strong enough. And so issues in our community that we need to take on. So for a short-term focus on the education side, obviously keeping schools open is critical. We need kids back and adults back, as you heard Ms. Beers say, and you can see the proof of that in our young people and the agency and voice that they have. And I'll tell you, and we really need to applaud these young people and young people across our district. There is a national report saying that students lost agency during this period of time, but we have examples here tonight and many, many other examples across the community of contradicting that, and really need to keep creating the opportunities for our kids to advocate, to have voice, to have agency, where there's some data that suggests that it has been lost through the shutdown. We also need to continue to address pandemic-induced capacity limitations. So these are supply chain issues, these are staffing issues, these are all of those other things that we've been dealing with over the course of this last school year for sure. We need to use those ESSER funds to attempt to address the mental health and social needs of our young people in a system that does not have enough clinicians. And so thinking about what are other options where clinicians are not available in the abundance that we need them to be. We need to make sure that we're working on that chronic absenteeism problem, and that it needs to be a community-wide response, that schools and communities together are making sure we get kids and families back into our schools, and that we are finding and re-engaging and enrolling our students back into schools. Obviously, for us, it's district-wide. This is part of our Get More efforts to re-engage people, but more broadly, all children in our community, whether they're choosing us or they're choosing charter or parochial options, we need kids back in school. So these are the short-term things identified in the report. In the long term, making sure that we really build back better systems. Something you've heard me saying the entire time is that we really have to be looking towards something that is better than what was left behind in the shutdown. There's so many people trying to get back to normal. This is an opportunity to design for something better for our kids, a more learner-centered approach, many more student and family supports, really addressing this digital equity finally, so we have anytime, anywhere learning, and staying focused on equitable funding. You know that we were partially successful in the last state budget by getting the fair funding formula, the first phase of the fair funding formula, into the state budget. But it is a temporary law, which means on June 30th of next year, it expires. And unless and until we get it put back in and hopefully get the next portion of it, we could lose it as quickly as we gained it. And there are other bills that have since occurred, including the property tax valuation challenge, where we no longer can challenge commercial property tax values if we believe they're undervalued and therefore not collecting what the taxpayers of Cleveland deserve to be collected. We know there's a backpack bill in Columbus that would say we would just take all the dollars, divvy them up, and put it in little fake backpacks that follow kids instead of the fair funding formula that creates the equity measures and that sort of thing. So a lot of work needs to be done to protect and to embrace and deepen that equity formula, particularly as the federal resources expire in 2024. Then finally, in post-secondary, so again, showing progress before COVID, we saw a 14 percentage point gain in persistence rates for students from the class of 2019 staying year 1 to year 2. College completion rates, particularly at community colleges and at Tri-C, is a particular example, increasing and you know, really thinking of community colleges not just as a pass-through from, you know, get some credits and go to a 4-year, but actually completing and getting degrees and leaving with those degrees. And then increases in college completion rates that were starting to manifest at 4-year institutions as well. We were also seeing that the post-secondary math and English remediation rates for our students has steadily been decreasing, even as our graduating class has gotten larger. So more kids are graduating and fewer of those students are graduating with the need for English and math remediation. That is in part because of the work that our educators are doing. It's also in part because colleges and universities are starting to think differently about prerequisite as opposed to co-requisite supports that use these as less and less as gatekeepers. So I would say it's good work in two spaces, not solely to our credit, although certainly our educators' work mattered here a great deal, but also to universities thinking differently as well. And we saw with Say Yes to Education our first increase in college access for the first time, a 5 percentage point gain in 2019 once we started to be able to assist with that tuition challenge that our kids and families were facing. But we also saw that the pandemic really hurt. And so you can see from 2019, where we were at 46%, by 2020, we were only at 36% of that cohort that went to any post-secondary institution, a 10% drop. Some good news here, it doesn't look like good news, but in 2021, we did not see a second-year drop, while the national data actually dropped for a second year in a row, with the class of 2021 also declining. And so we actually saw a slight rebound in 4-year institutions and just about an even balance in 2-year community colleges. But not back to where we needed to be, and certainly not big enough anyway when only less than half of our kids were already going to post-secondary. So again, there are some short-term and long-term recommendations about really doubling down on advising to make sure high school students have what they need to be admitted to college, that we have re-engagement and re-enrollment strategies for those classes that stopped out during the past 2 years, that we expand the retention efforts that we've seen working at our community colleges and public 4-year colleges in particular, and making sure we have the appropriate funding to solve the financial needs, as well as focusing on some non-financial needs for our young people. One of the things we've seen in Ohio and other places is there have been more and more attention to slowing or freezing tuition, but the total costs have continued to rise because a lot of those freezes then have been moved over to the room and board, the meal plans, the other things that were not frozen. And so while Say Yes focuses on tuition, now we have this rising cost and the total cost of attendance that we've got to continue to work on. And then long-term, that's teed up as number one. Post-secondary has to be affordable. Total cost of attendance has to be affordable. And we have to make sure that young people have ample access opportunities, and that once they're there, there's good retention strategies in place as well. So the final section of the report is a series of recommendations for our community. And so there are 5 recommendations for the community to pursue. First, ensuring institutions at all levels are appropriately funded with so that they can really bear down on these recovery strategies, knowing that these strategies are not going to be short-term, 1 year quick and done. There's actually been now some published articles about the second wave of lost learning, for young people who were delayed, particularly in reading and math in the early preschool and kindergarten spaces, and that we haven't yet fully seen that play out. Now, we don't have to let that be a manifest complete. We can do something about it, but there's already scientific data starting to point to a second wave of this lost learning challenge. We also know the incredible mental health needs for people, kids and adults both, and so investing not only in academic but also behavioral health. The third is that connectivity issue, really making sure that we get our community connected and that people know how to use those tools well. So the digital literacy tools, not only do we give you devices, but you know how to fully use them to participate in parent conferences or any number of other things that can be unlocked when we have a digitally connected community. Retaining, promoting, and expanding the educational workforce to get at these staffing challenges that all of us are facing. There are too many positions and too few educators at all levels. And back-end services like finance and IT and talent department. We don't compete with the private sector right now where people can get literally $30,000 increases by leaving the public sector and going into the private sector. We also have a number of people that make the place run, drive the buses, keep us safe, feed our children, clean for us, answer the telephones. And again, there are very lucrative jobs outside of the public sector, so we have to continue to focus on these staffing gaps. And then making sure that post-secondary education is an option for all by making it affordable, making sure we have scholarships, making sure we have federal and state support as we look at a recovery that's going to need to deepen the education investment for a group of kids, of young people who had a very disrupted, a nearly 2-year period. And frankly, even this last year, while we were back in school, we know the impact of disruptive attendance, of the behavioral health issues that we faced, of the COVID, where we had to do some rolling shutdowns because of classrooms or schools that saw COVID outbreaks, particularly with Omicron. And so we should not look at last year as the problem was solved and now we're recovering. We were still working through really challenging times for kids and adults alike. And the point of the report, which I really think is just really important, is making sure that our community knows that a now 2.5 year disruption is going to take a multi-year correction as well. So again, this is only a portion of what was presented at the public release of the report. The report can be found at educationforwardcle.org. I would encourage members of the community either to download it from this website or right off of our board agenda. It is in my report this evening. And certainly we will, as the reports continue to be printed and distributed, we'll make them available as well. So I guess I'll pause for any comments about the Education Forward report before concluding with some other short remarks.
Ms. Valdez.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon, for the report. You highlighted how our work with closing some of these gaps in enrollment and chronic absenteeism and other things like that had been lost a lot during the pandemic, and it hadn't been able to be gained as well afterwards. Have we been able to assess how this has academically impacted our scholars to the same degree?
Yes, so our state data has just started reporting in as of last week. So we have some raw data that shows that we, compared to 2019, which is the last full data set we have, we cohort to cohort are behind where we would have expected to be from the 2019 cohort pretty much across the board. One thing that's going to be really challenging is that the state adopted a new state report card during the pandemic, and so we're not going to be able to look at the old 2019 report card and the new 2022 report card in an apples-to-apples sort of way. And the measures, so we went from an A to F report card now to a 1 to 5-star report card, and a F and a 1 are not the same. A D and a 2 are not the same. So we're not going to be able to say, okay, well, that was a D, and so a 2 is a D. So for example, we've already simulated the early childhood, third grade reading data, and it's early, so there's a lot more work to do. But where we would have had a D on the A to F report card system, we would, if we had been on the 1 to 5 stars, that same D would have been a 1 star, not a 2 star. So the bars have been raised in the midst of all of this. So it's going to be a little bit hard to be fully visible about those impacts, but we do know that achievement scores came in lower overall than the 2019 cohort. We do know that the class of 2021, who had the end of their junior year in remote, and most of their senior year in remote, and then hybrid or remote C for the kids that didn't come back, that graduation rate is going to be impacted. And to the report's point of view, we need to be making sure we're focused on that 5th year and not giving up on them. But we're going to see an impact on that cohort. I estimate a 6 to 7 percentage point impact on that. I think this cohort that we're just graduating now, most graduations are done, but we have summer still, will rebound. These are kids that came back to school in person this year, but that doesn't change the real challenge that last cohort, the 2021 cohort, experienced. So I think we should be prepared to see some real challenges and really getting data that sets a new baseline benchmark to get us moving in the right directions again.
So to your point, do you anticipate starting to develop some action steps for how to move forward as this report has for the other gaps?
Yeah, my team and I are actively working on that. We actually have a full day workshop tomorrow. And so tomorrow we're going to be focusing on kind of 2 core areas. So what is it that we need to do for students, parents, educators, and frankly our community around the attendance issues, the behavioral health issues, the things that prevent being able to be a fully engaged active learner, the disruptors. That's on one side. And then on the other side, what are the learning and teaching strategies that are going to make sure that we're focused on core literacy and numeracy skills that we are having, in our out-of-school time. We have out-of-school time programs for every K-8 school in the district, that those providers are also providing high-quality tutoring. We're looking at some tutoring programs that are 24/7 digital tutoring programs. We're looking at the potential of having kind of the old homework hotline kind of opportunity so that parents can be more engaged. So we're actually workshopping this tomorrow all day from 9 to 4 p.m. Strategies that we've been working on and will crystallize, and then this is what lets us resource through the ESSER or the ARPA funding, the things we think can really help us to mitigate what has occurred and help our kids and families catch up.
Thank you.
Ms. Ellicott?
Mr. Gordon, just a question about the post-secondary enrollment piece of the report. I know that is that just higher ed compact institutions, or is it all post-secondary enrollment? Because I know the higher ed compact report is specific to like a set of schools, which does cover, I think, the vast majority of schools. But is this every single student that enrolled or didn't, or is it just at those institutions?
I believe that this is pulled from the National Clearinghouse data. So it's not every single child, because there are some families that opt out of the public nature of it, but it's the great majority of them. But I'll verify that for you, Ms. Ellicott, to make sure that I'm reporting that correctly.
Thank you.
Oh, Mrs. Lane?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Gordon, I'm pleased that one of the follow-ups was really, dealing with mental health and how much our students and families need that. A teacher that I've known for 15 years, was talking to me just about some of the challenges. And, a lot of our families have experienced trauma, but specifically related to COVID, like a parent told her, well, my child someone died in the family. And, and it was just a very tough situation because, at the end of the day, she still needs to, of course, educate and figure out how to help the family. But there's, it's just a hard situation. So I'm glad that will be, and maybe different opportunities like the 24/7 and whatever we need to do, we certainly need to support that. And the other thing I'm thinking about when you're talking about the data and just all the changes, and, this has happened so many times. Like, I think even in my 15 years, it's probably changed, I wouldn't say 15 times, but probably 3 to 5 times. And I do know, I don't remember if it was 5 to 10 years ago when we had Dr. Johnson and Dr. Berkman help us to explain to the public, like in a more simple format that, so I would just suggest that whatever additional help we can get, they do sit on our board, like ex officio. So however we do that, certainly your team is totally expert in this, but I think whatever we can do to help with the whole community and really understanding things, the better we would be. So thank you. Yeah, Louise was remembering that as well. We had a lot of meetings with those very smart gentlemen.
Well,
Thank
and,
you.
we have two new, and I think we've met the new CSU president, and then Eric and I had the opportunity to be introduced to the new Tri-C president at the conference we went to. I don't think he takes official office until July 1st.
Friday.
So sooner than I thought. So it's sort of already on the radar to at least meet and have conversations with them, and I know Mrs. Bloomberg has offered, whatever kind of help she can provide, she's happy to do it, so that's a great idea.
All right, thank you. So just a few quick other items. On yesterday, today's Tuesday. So yesterday was the first day of our summer learning experience for this year. This is part of how we're trying to help families and kids be able to catch up on that lost learning time. I was able to start the day at Wade Park School. Mayor Bibb joined me, and Mr. Firo, who is here this evening, joined us at Wade Park to greet our young people who are coming to that particular site. I then got to meet Mr. Firo at George Washington Carver, where we got to visit students as they were transitioning into their Enrich portion, and actually were already engaged on day one, so we sat with a couple of young men who were in the STEM project where they were already brainstorming what characteristics of the profile of a graduate they would use to solve this problem of building a not thinking what it is, but like a satellite that they would launch into the ecosystem. Got to see that kicking off. And then we also, a number of us on the board and administration, got to join the mayor and his team to canvass and get the word out about our summer learning experience, as well as the city's summer programming and the city's evening basketball program that they're launching this year as well. So we had a great day kicking off the first day of summer learning experience. As of this afternoon, we have 6,346 students enrolled. Not quite as large as last year, but still sizable numbers compared to the about 1,200 we would typically have in a summer school. It is not only remediation, so there is a finish portion which is focused on literacy, numeracy, and credit recovery, but there's also, as I mentioned, the enrichment portion in arts, sciences, STEM, and in projects called Love the Land, which are civics and social studies oriented projects. And again, an example we saw is young people who will be building a tiny house and working to solve a problem for people with disabilities that often houses are not equipped for them, but tiny houses actually present a low-cost alternative. So that's the project they'll be unpacking and exploring. And then in the afternoon, the second half of the day is out-of-school time activities, engagement activities, so that kids are continuing to re-engage in those socialization skills, getting the extra tutoring opportunities, that sort of thing. We will continue to enroll tomorrow, and then on Thursday we'll make some staffing decisions. Because we do have a little slack, even though we will have to freeze staffing, we can't continue to adjust staffing throughout because this is only a 4 or 5 week program, so we have to do it pretty quickly. But we have a little bit of flex that if people continue to come, we'll have some seats available. So really excited to get that off. The pre-K-8 program is 5 weeks long, ending July 29th. The high school program is 4 weeks long, ending July 22nd, and that's built around when our year-round schools, high schools resume. Then we'll conclude the summer with another set of 3-week camps with our partners. That includes the city, libraries. I see Director Thomas is here, Metro Parks, lots of our out-of-school time providers that will provide another series of 3-week camps so that our young people can be engaged from the day school let out to the day school starts back up, and we can give a 2.5-week break for our educators before first day for most faculty to return. So really excited that we kicked that off. I love the first day of school still, all these years later, and so it was fun to get up and head to a school and be with our young people. And then in your media package, I just would point to some of our top social media posts was about summer learning, also about our job fair, where we had another approximately 60 people that attended. We were able to hire teachers and substitute teachers, as well as a number of operational employees that are all in the pre-hire process now, pending background checks. Also, our track and field combine that we hosted with Cuyahoga Community College, the HBCU Combine. And for those who are not familiar with combines, these are opportunities for our juniors athletes to be observed by potential recruiters as they go into their senior year. And we were really focusing on HBCU colleges and giving those recruiters an opportunity to see our young people. We have our baseball and softball one coming up next Tuesday on the 5th at Progressive Field. We've also had basketball and football already, so that was featured. And then our Juneteenth social media was also featured. You also have copies of materials, including our new enrollment brochure that is kind of a full glossy that we're going to continue to try to attract families back to the district. Our summer learning experience flyers for canvassing, we actually have them right here. So those of us who were out knocking doors, this big yellow thing that hopefully caught attention is the thing that we were handing out. Our community ads in the Cleveland Observer, the Collinwood Observer, the Eastside Daily News, the Plain Press, and the Profile News. And also, particularly the hold the date for our summer commencement, which is Friday, August 5th at 6:00 p.m. And this is the last of this class of 2022 cohort. And always one of my favorites because everybody's in the multiple colored gowns from their particular schools. And then finally, our new teacher induction flyer, where we're trying also to share with our new teachers that we really put more into their support as well, so that they get more by being an educator here as well. And then finally, I just want to recognize a couple of people. This evening will be Dr. Jared Fox's last meeting with us. Dr. Fox has completed his Harvard residency and earned his doctorate. He also, along with Kevin Bertzloff, was very instrumental in the board policy updates that we've accomplished over the year. And Dr. Fox, that flag means stand up.
Yes, I see you shaking your head.
So thank you to Dr. Fox for his year of service. I just want to remind everybody that Dr. Fox is a Rhodes graduate. So he came home to Cleveland and to CMSD to do this work with us. This is also, unfortunately, our last meeting with Derek Ritchie, our Chief Financial Officer. He and his family are embarking on an incredible journey as a family. We talk about taking on complex tasks that are worthy of the productive struggle and finding joy and adventure in doing it. Mr. Ritchie and his family are doing that. And so he will actually be with the district through September, I believe September 5th, but his last formal day right now is scheduled for July 29th, and then he'll use a little vacation as he and his family transition. We are very excited that we have identified and hired an interim chief financial officer who's agreed to be with us to take the reins, and that is Nathan Mortimer. And Mr. Mortimer is here this evening, I believe.
Where?
There you are. Thank you, Mr. Mortimer. So Mr. Mortimer has a really long, successful career in finance, operation, and other areas at the University of Akron. He has recently retired from the University of Akron and has made his next career journey these shorter interim roles in the public sector, helping out organizations like ours. And so we're really thrilled to have him here, have him observing as he'll be sitting in this chair that Derek will be vacating when we return in August. And then finally, last but certainly not least, I want to recognize our Chief Academic Officer, Valentina Moxon, who is retiring after 30 years of service to the district, including teacher, principal, network leader, academic officer. Ms. Moxon's last day is Thursday, and on Friday, she and her husband are jumping on a plane and heading to Mexico to visit with her family. So she is taking retirement seriously. So Valentina, thank you for your many years of service to CMSD. So can we give every one of our colleagues just one more round of applause? And that will conclude my report.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gordon, and to all of you who he mentioned, Derek and Valentina and Jared. you know, the district is better because you were here. And that, to me, is what matters most. And I can say it, you know, from my heart. It's true. We'll miss you. You're welcome back anytime. As I told Valentina in front of other people, we need a lot of substitute teachers. So the offer still stands, Valentina. I think you're qualified for it. So, but thank you to all of you for your work. It'll be a different place without you. Before we head into our next section, which is the public participation segment, I want to say two things. The people who are sitting in the back, there are seats up front if you would prefer to come up front and be closer. And I also want to just recognize a few guests we have here this evening. From the Ohio Board of Education, Merle Johnson is here. There she is right there.
And might I add, retired Cleveland teacher.
See, she found a second career, Valentina. Also, City Councilman Kevin Conwell and County Councilwoman Yvonne Conwell are here, and I'm imagining they're sitting next to each other. And the Executive Director of the Cleveland Public Library, Felton Thomas, is also here with us this evening. Oh, I'm sorry.
We can applaud her.
Yes, we can applaud her too.
Mike's off.
Thank you for joining us. Did I miss anybody else?
We do have one other guest that I'll introduce.
Okay. So next we will have our period of public participation for a period no longer than 40 minutes. During this segment of the business meeting, we will hear all public comment on either agenda or non-agenda items. This public participation period will be for persons to address the board for up to 3 minutes each. If you wish to address the board, you should have already filled out the request to speak form that was available at the table, on the table in the back of the room, and submitted that form prior to the start of the meeting. If anyone wishing to address the board has any written material that they would like to submit to the board, please give it to Mr. Bertzloff, and he can distribute the materials to the board. While we welcome the opportunity to hear from members of the community at our meetings, there is, of course, an expectation that persons addressing the board will show respect for our audience by conducting themselves in a courteous and professional manner, as befits a public meeting in a school with some young people present this evening. We actually only have a few this evening. I also wanted to remind the public that we are now posting on our meeting agenda at the school district's responses to persons who have spoken during public participation at the previous board business meeting. And so with that, Mr. Tracy, if you would like to go first this evening, followed by Mr. Freeman. I can put you at the end if you would prefer.
Water. Water. Tell me this. Wouldn't an insurance settlement of $3.25 million jack our rates big time? You talked about the insurance rates going up. Maybe that's why. So how much of an increase was the insurance jacked? And the person that caused this, is he still with the district? Makes you want to scratch your head. Lake Mead, Colorado River, gone. Water. The West, they're out of water. We have water. Why do we need tax abatements? That's why people are coming here. We have water. Why are children always suffering? Why do you take the money from the children and give it to the developers? I'm not against tax abatement. Take all the taxes you want. But the money that's supposed to go to the children stays with the children. because taking money from children is criminal. Now, we have a problem with this tax abating the children's money. We have a stadium that you and the council took the $1 million that was supposed to be held harmless thanks to Jackson, and now the stadium's not good enough. They want billions more. What are we doing? Now, I know the board understood this, because without it, Mr. Gordon couldn't have put it on the mayor's agenda for the Education Committee. And remember, I want to retire, and since that's been done, it's 6 months. 6 months. Now, I know you want that money returned and restored. I know Mr. Gordon wants that money restored. I know the children want that money restored. So I guess I'm talking to the wrong people here. Right? Now, either you're going to restore that $1 million and gain respect, but how long is it going to take? You either need to do it now or say so that you're not going to do it ever. He needs that $1 million to plan with. They need that $1 million a year to plan with. And by the way, we should get all the money for the last 11 years, $11 million. So, please, I want to retire. I'm too old to be doing this. I really am. And there's council people in the room. You know me, you heard me talk about it before. It was wrong back then. It's still wrong. So, I guess the mayor's the same.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Mr. Freeman and then Mrs. Coles.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Mr. Gordon, in regard to the pre-apprenticeship program at Max Hayes, there are some concerns that I want to express that I am concerned that you address. One is, first of all, the enrollment policy at Max Hayes, which unfortunately results in Max Hayes to far excessive an extent being a neighborhood school. Max Hayes should be, in terms of its enrollment policies, much more amenable and feasible for students who have and express a greater concern for participating in the pre-apprenticeship program at Max Hayes, being able to more readily be admitted to Max Hayes. So again, that means that it has to become less and less a neighborhood school. The second concern that I have relative to Max Hayes in the apprenticeship program relates to the reality that without a driver's license, it's not feasible for Max Hayes students to participate in the apprenticeship program as seniors, so that what is necessary is for the administration to make it easier for senior students at Max Hayes who are concerned with participating in the pre-apprenticeship program to be able to get their driver's license in terms of some kind of vouchers or something of that nature. And then my third concern relative to the pre-apprenticeship program at Max Hayes is that Mr. Nesta, who has been coordinating that program, has retired. And I'm very concerned that a successor, I'm very concerned that a successor for him be selected as expeditiously as possible relative to the forthcoming school year.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Mrs. Coles?
Good evening. Good evening. My concern is over the calendar, so to speak. I have like several questions, not on the actual calendar, but on the structure of the school that does the year-round. Because what we asked before when we did the all-girls school is we asked why. So now I'm going to ask that question, why? And I'm not asking it just out of curiosity. I'm asking it because what I found when my granddaughter went to the bridge program at Case, that we had children that could not participate because they were still in school. And teachers, how do we used to have the institutes that would really cover in depth all the new programs for the upcoming year. Well, the year-round teachers cannot participate. So what I want to know is what is the advantage? So I would like to have some data that says it makes sense, because you're talking about taking children into college. And many of the colleges have bridge programs in which our children cannot participate. And those bridge programs are significant, Case especially, when they're teaching them how to do that engineering math. They spend all day, every day, all summer. And then when our kids can't participate, what good is that scholarship if they go on the Case and can't pass the classes? So that's one of the concerns. If year-round is to be a thing, it should be proven to be beneficial. That's number one. And then, what is number two? I'm getting old. Volunteerism. Cynthia Burks used to be in charge of volunteerism for the entire district. And she saw to it that volunteers were placed. The number one, I can't remember which educator said it, but he said the number one value of education is legitimate parental involvement. And so what we're not having that, I've not been to a live parent meeting this year. And I would like to suggest that we look at two positions, Dean of Engagement and Campus Coordinator. I would also like to see their job descriptions, because I think that every building should have a volunteer coordinator whose sole job is to bring in business partners and in conjunction with the principal, to bring in day-to-day volunteers, because when we had liaisons, that was their job. They did 100% of that volunteer. They looked after the PTA, they looked after the SCC. I don't think that's the job of the Dean of Engagement, even though it should be with the title Dean of Engagement. So those, I want to see those two job descriptions, and I want to see someone deal with that, some kind of volunteerism in every building, so that it's not just there, it's institutionalized in every building with a district-wide coordinator of volunteerism, because that's the cheapest way we're going to advance the district when grandma is in the hallway. There was one other thing, because I'm trying to get these things into someone's minds and in energy while we're planning, because the other thing is we have to have committee meetings. Mr. Gordon is going to have a wonderful meeting tomorrow. He's going to be meeting with his staff, and he's going to be talking about one academic thing after another without all of the vested people there. You won't be there. I won't be there. We won't have a business partner that might give us dollars there. We'll have the mindset of administrators. And that doesn't do. It just doesn't do. You have to have all of the vested parties involved. So I really want the board to consider, if they have no other committees, to form an education committee. Because what you are seeing on your agenda, pay attention, under academics, which is the most important thing we do, there's usually one, maybe two items. Under building a building and screwing a screw, there might be 15 items. But under academics, there's one sometimes, two sometimes. That's your most important area. And if you are not imparting, but simply allowing someone to put upon you an academic agenda, it's not the district that you want, it's the district that the administration wants. And I'm very, very pleased with a lot of things that are going on. And then there's one last thing, which it's not in my purview, but I'm looking at teachers being moved about. My daughter is the prime example, right? She's on number 14 this year. She's on the 14th placement in 20 years. And there's no reason. Why some of our teachers are quitting is just that. They're being moved about at the whims of the principals. You have heard of my daughter this year, right? Who won the MUTs? Who won the youth in government? Who won the this? Under those circumstances, if she's the chief person, academic person, why would you move her? She's not worried about it, because you're going to move her to Collinwood, which has 250 people. And I'm going to go into Collinwood, Mr. Gordon, and perhaps I will model for you what happens when you have legitimate parent involvement, because I think I can bring 250 children across the board all by myself. So, but I want to have those things. But if it were an education committee, then I wouldn't have to come here, because I've already read the board agenda. I've already gone through all of that on the internet. So I don't really need to get in my car and climb here. But one last thing, I almost forgot it. You're renaming schools. And when we ask as parents to rename a school after Mary Connor, which was our heart and soul under the desegregation movement, we were just flatly denied. Now there's a Mary somebody getting a school named after her. And Ms. Pagan, which I love her, I love Nadia, but we got no consideration for one of the people that saved people's lives during the desegregation movement.
Thank you, Mrs. Coles. You right? Okay. So next, the board will consider the adoption of 37 resolutions in the area of Board of Education, Finance, Operations, Academics, and Talent, all but 3 of which were discussed at our June 14th board work session. 7.01 through 7.05. These are the 5 Board of Education resolutions that we did discuss on June 14th work session. The chair will now entertain a motion to adopt the following resolutions. 7.01, making an appointment to the Cleveland Public Library Board of Trustees. 7.02, adopting the Cleveland Public Library tax budget for fiscal year 2023 and transmitting the Cuyahoga County budget and transmitting to the Cuyahoga County Budget Commission. 7.03, awarding the Chief Executive Officer a salary increase of 3% effective July 1st, 2022. 7.04, amending and rescinding board policies on students, and 7.05, amending and rescinding board policies on school community relations.
So moved.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon, we discussed these resolutions previously. Is there any further explanation?
Yes, ma'am. So these are the resolutions that we discussed at the board work session. Dr. Thomas, you had inquired about the potential of adding food service workers and bus drivers to the child abuse training policy. We believe that that can be done, but would likely be a matter of bargaining. So we have flagged that for discussion with each of our labor unions. So wanted to make sure that you knew we followed up on that. And then Ms. Ellicott, you had sought clarification about our policy JFE for pregnant students, and we did change the language in the resolution from board approval to district approval. Other than that, the resolutions are presented unchanged from the board work session.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Any further discussion from board members?
A
Yes,
question,
ma'am.
or a request. Mr. Gordon, do you mind, since this is a new process that we did this year, do you mind at a high level just going through how we came to these school naming resolutions that we're at now, for anyone that missed it?
We're not talking about this.
Oh, sorry. When we get to those, can you do that? Thanks.
Happy to do so.
We're on the first 5.
So
Got it. Okay, after
are
that.
there any further questions or comments on 7.01 through 7.05? Yes, Dr. Thomas.
Thank you. I just want to say once again to Felton Thomas, the director of the public library, to please extend to Mr. Hairston our appreciation for his body of work and what he's done. And I'm looking over here, and I'm looking over here. His body of work, what he's done, who he is, and thank him again for his service. And then I also want to thank you again publicly for the camp that you're going to do, the 3 weeks in the second half of the summer for our kids and what's going to happen, and what a great partner you've been with us. And I will say, once again, I say this every year, I would love to have a joint meeting between our 2 boards to talk about the money that we spend, how we work together, talk about the academics Mrs. Coles was talking about, and just get to know our boards better. We see you every time you come here for to get somebody renewed, and it's not enough. So I would love to see a joint meeting of some sort. But please extend to Mr. Hairston our appreciation.
I think Trustee Hairston can be a great kind of connector here because everybody seems to love him on this board. So I will make sure that I bring.
We love you too. Just don't be confused.
No, but I will work with Trustee Hairston and everyone to do just that.
That would be fun. Great. That's a great idea. Great. Thank you.
Hearing no further discussion, Mr. Ritchie, can you please call the roll?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Bingham?
Yes.
Mr. Hurd?
Yes.
Ms. Dempsey?
Yes.
Ms. Ellicott?
Yes.
Ms. Link?
Yes.
Dr. Schroeder?
Yes.
Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Valdez?
Yes.
8 ayes, that motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. We now have even more seats down front for any of you people in the back. The chair will now entertain a motion to adopt Resolution 7.06, renaming Lewis Agassiz School to Mary Church Terrell School.
So moved.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon?
Thank you. This is the first of 3 renaming recommendations that are before the board based on the work session dialogue and the feedback that we gathered. And so I'm presenting these recommendations in turn for the board's consideration. To Ms. Ellicott's earlier question, you may recall that the board last July and August tasked my team and I to create a ad hoc work group to really take on two tasks. First, review available policies and research to present a proposed set of criteria for determining when a school name is appropriate representation of the district's values and therefore worthy being the name of a school. And second was to try to create essentially a catalog of our school names and biographical sketches of, who the school's named after, what the school is named after, so that the board could consider whether any school names needed to be revisited. In September of 2021, at a board development session, we then went through a list of school names to determine school names that might need to be considered, and adopted a resolution identifying a small subset of schools to start with, 3 of which we're presenting to you this evening, and tasked us then to go into the community to gather feedback to provide to this board. So we then formed in each of the school communities a community task force that had several meetings, both live in person and Zoom meetings, as well as some asynchronous opportunities to gather feedback, to get names and get recommendations to bring to the board, 3 of which, again, we are bringing forward to you this evening. And then we also took those same names, the new names recommended, and again captured some historical perspective of who these people are and things that the board might need to consider, which is the conversation the board had at our last meeting, our June work session. And finally, upon approval, the district will be tasked with actually implementing a kind of a reflagging of the school. And Mr. Hurd, you had asked about an estimated cost for that. For the kind of physical signage that would be put on the outside of a school, we estimate about $11,000 per school. There will be also some soft costs for things like T-shirts and internal stuff that we will do to help kids and families and community build community around new names. But kind of the large cost is the actual physical signage, and we estimate that at about $11,000 per school.
Any further question or discussion from board members?
It's a long time coming
Okay.
for this school, for this particular school.
Hearing no further discussion, Mr. Ritchie, can you please call the roll?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Bingham?
Yes.
Mr. Hurd?
Yes.
Ms. Dempsey?
Yes.
Ms. Ellicott?
Yes.
Ms. Link?
Yes.
Dr. Schroeder?
Yes.
Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Valdez?
Yes.
8 ayes, that motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. The Resolution 7.07, the chair will now entertain a motion to adopt Resolution 7.07, renaming Patrick Henry School to Stephanie Tubbs Jones School.
So moved?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon.
Thank you. This is the second of our 3 recommendations, recommending the renaming of Patrick Henry School to Stephanie Tubbs Jones School. I want to acknowledge Councilman Conwell, who's been an advocate for this particular school and this particular name. So thank you, sir, for your leadership on that. And County Councilwoman Conwell, I know you also have been a great partner here. I also want to particularly recognize we reached out to Stephanie Tubbs Jones' son, Mervyn Leroy Jones II, who is actually watching tonight's meeting on live stream, and will get to see this school named after his mother. So we are recommending the renaming of Patrick Henry to Stephanie Tubbs Jones School.
Is there any comment or from discussion from board members? Hearing none, Mr. Ritchie, can you please call the roll?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Bingham?
Yes.
Mr. Hurd?
Yes.
Ms. Dempsey?
Yes.
Ms. Ellicott?
Yes.
Ms. Link?
Yes.
Dr. Schroeder?
Yes.
Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Valdez?
Yes.
8 ayes, that motion passes.
Unanimously, Councilman Conwell and Mervyn.
And Resolution 7.08, the chair will now entertain a motion to adopt a resolution renaming Thomas Jefferson International Newcomers Academy to Natividad Pagan International Newcomers Academy.
So moved?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
This is the third and final recommendation for this evening to rename Thomas Jefferson International Newcomers Academy to Natividad Pagan International Newcomers Academy. Ms. Pagan is a well loved community member here in Cleveland who was an active educator for CMSD. She was an administrator who ran our multilingual, multicultural program. She was a principal of Joseph M. Gallagher School and ultimately was a principal at Thomas Jefferson International Newcomer Academy as well. She's also she was a well-known and beloved community leader, particularly in the Puerto Rican community here in Cleveland. Dr. Mosley, on my behalf, was able to reach out to Natividad's daughter and son, who both live in Florida, and we're really pleased to have Melissa Leah Pagan here this evening. Ms. Pagan, if you would stand and if you'd like to say a few words. You are welcome to say a few words, and I just want the board in particular and the community to know that Ms. Pagan got on a plane and flew to Cleveland to be here with us this evening. We'd love for you to come forward to the microphone if you'd like to say any words on behalf of your family as we honor your mother.
We are honored. We're grateful for the love, the honor, and the respect you've shown my mother. She loved what she did. She was passionate about it. From very young, we grew up seeing her always stand and fight for the rights of minorities, and especially non-English speaking minorities. And so to see this happen is a joy and a complete honor, and I'm grateful to be here, to be a part of it with my brothers, my sister, and thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. If there's no further comment or discussion from the board, Mr. Ritchie, can you please call the roll?
I'd be honored to. Sorry. Ms. Bingham?
Yes.
Mr. Hurd?
Yes.
Ms. Dempsey?
Yes.
Ms. Ellicott?
Yes.
Ms. Link?
Yes.
Dr. Schroeder?
Yes.
Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Valdez?
Yes.
8 ayes, that motion passes.
Reminds me of that. Okay.
Been one of those meetings.
I was going to say, I didn't know we were all going to dissolve into tears. I'm usually the sappy one. I'm glad to know that there were plenty to join us. Thank you so much for being here. It was very touching. We're glad you could come. The chair will now entertain a motion to adopt the following resolutions 8.01 through 8.16. 8.01, authorizing the final appropriation adjustments to the fiscal year 2022 annual appropriation measure. 8.02, adopting the fiscal year 2023 annual appropriation measure. 8.03, delegating authority to the chief executive officer to enter into contracts and purchase orders for amounts up to and including $50,000 for fiscal year 2023. 8.04, authorizing the chief financial officer to pay all required out-of-district tuition costs. 8.05, authorizing payment to Fifth Third Bank for the district's credit cards and procurement cards in an amount not to exceed $5 million for fiscal year 2023. 8.06, authorizing the payment of charges incurred for utility costs by the Cleveland Municipal School District for fiscal year 2022-2023 in an amount not to exceed $15 million. 8.07, authorizing a contract for the purchase of fraud hotline intake and related case management services for fiscal year 2022-2023 for an initial one-year term with 2 one-year renewal options in an amount not to exceed $2,400,000 and that's not right. I'm sorry. It's $2,450. One too many zeros. 8.08, authorizing the distribution of the Partnering Community Schools amount generated by the passage of Issue 68 among the Cleveland Municipal School District's qualifying Partnering Community Schools. 8.09, authorizing the acceptance of gifts and grants from the Case Western Reserve University, Arizona Board of Regents, Cleveland Guardians Charities, Daniel E. Morgan Memorial Fund, the Iola Foundation, the Ireland Foundation Fund, the Molly Agnes Voinovich Memorial Fund, the William and Patricia Warner Fund, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, and authorizing the Chief Executive Officer to spend the funds in accordance with the terms and conditions of the gifts and grants.
Excuse me.
What?
What you read is different from what's on the agenda.
Okie dokie.
8.09.
How is it different? I'm sorry.
We have added some additional grants since the,
But some have been left out. The Walter and Terry Bettinger Foundation, the Savant Technologies.
yes, we've added these since the work session, so there are additional grants showing on the business agenda that were not on the original work session agenda.
But I didn't read that one.
But she didn't read them, and does she need to read them to make it legit? Is that Robert's Rules of Order?
Yes, my apologies, I was not aware that there were changes to the title.
All right, hold on.
So, if the board chair likes, I'd be happy to read if you don't have it ready. I just have it up now on my computer.
I have it up. I can read it. So I will reread 8.09 so that we get everything. Thank you, Dr. Thomas. So 8.09 is authorizing the acceptance of gifts and grants from the Cleveland and Gunn Foundations, Case Western Reserve University, Arizona Board of Regents, Cleveland Guardians Charities, Daniel E. Morgan Memorial Fund, the Iola Foundation, the Ireland Foundation Fund, the Molly Agnes Voinovich Memorial Fund, the William and Patricia Warner Fund, the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, the Cleveland Foundation, the Walt and Terry Bettinger Foundation, Savant Technologies, and Envision Excellence in STEM Education, Inc., and authorizing the Chief Executive Officer to spend the funds in accordance with the terms and conditions of the gifts and grants. 8.10, authorizing the acceptance of grants from the City of Cleveland and the State Support Team Region 3, and authorizing the Chief Executive...
Read it from the
Yep,
agenda.
sorry. Let's see. I'll start over. 8.10, authorizing the acceptance of grants from the State of Ohio, the City of Cleveland, the State Support Team Region 3, and the Ohio Department of Education, and authorizing the Chief Executive Officer to spend the funds in accordance with the terms and conditions of the grants.
The rest are fine.
Okay, thank you. 8.11, authorizing the Chief Executive Officer to procure casualty and liability insurance coverage and excess coverage for the period June 30, 2022 through June 30, 2023 in an amount not to exceed $1,332,750. 8.12, authorizing the Chief Executive Officer to procure cyber risk insurance coverage for the period June 30, 2022 through June 30, 2023 in an amount not to exceed $325,000.
8.01, the final appropriation for fiscal year '22, so that we can close out the year as of tonight with 2 days left in the fiscal year. And then updated the initial fiscal year 2023 appropriation to reflect the current encumbrances and advance figures that will move from this budget year into next budget year. I also want to point out that the advance into our federal programs, you'll recall that we always advance general fund money into our federal program budget until we get the state to fund the federal budget, is much larger this year because the federal program budget is much larger with our ESSER and ARP funds. So you'll see a large advance that will then move back typically in September. For 8.09, we did add a number of additional grants that came in between the board work session and this meeting so that they would be on the books and be able to be worked on over the summer. The first is a $509,740 grant from the Cleveland and Gunn Foundations to support CMSD Equity and Me, our racial equity training that we have been implementing. A second is, I'm going to skip this one for a moment. The second one on here is an additional $204,000 awarded to both Garrett Morgan schools on our Garrett Morgan campus from the Cleveland Foundation for the implementation of the 2 new programs at those schools. The third is a $5,000 gift from Savant Technologies to MC Squared STEM High School. The fourth is a grant of $204,000 for an executive on loan salary and benefits for Jeff McClellan, who was a school-based leader at MC Squared STEM, but has been recently working for TIES, which is the Teaching and Excellence in STEM. And then finally, a $20,000 from Glenville Girls Basketball. And I saved that one for last because I want to read you the email that sits behind this particular one. So if you haven't had enough emotion tonight, this email actually was received originally in February, but the grant has just now come through the cycle. Dear Ms. Bell, hello. Last evening, your girls' basketball team traveled to play our girls' team in the OHSAA tourney at Cuyahoga Valley Christian Academy. You should be incredibly proud of the young ladies who represented Glenville. They played hard, played fairly, and never quit. As the father of a CVCA player, I was more impressed with the effort put forth by your players than many teams we have played this season. And I was even more impressed when your players voluntarily joined our players for a post-game prayer at midcourt. Our girls couldn't stop talking about how your student athletes carried themselves, competed, and maintained positive attitudes. My wife and I also noticed that some of your players were missing the basics like socks, eyeglass bands, warm-ups, and other items. But it was clear they had heart and commitment despite these limitations. We'd like to make a donation of $20,000 to the Glenville High School girls basketball program to help support the coach, the players, and the program overall, so your student athletes can have world-class uniforms, warm-ups, matching shoes, and the like to match the effort we saw on the court. Please let me know how we can send this check, and if there are other ways we can support your program. I've also pasted a Facebook posting from the gentleman who keeps the scoreboard for us at the scorer's table. What a blessing it was to see our girls all together in prayer. Our daughter is the blonde in a white uniform on the left side, offering the prayer, standing between two of your young ladies. Thank you. All my very best, Walt Bettinger.
Wow.
So,
Thank you, Mr. Bettinger.
Thank you.
So yeah, I needed to read that letter, both for the incredible gift, but also for just the girls who earned it, you know, our young women who made this lasting impression. So with that, one final change on these resolutions is in 8.10, the grants from city, county, state, and federal resources. We have added the school year 21-22 SEEP award in the amount of $950,000, and we've added the 11 school year 22-23 entitlement grants that we have received so far from the Ohio Department of Education. These are the title programs, Title 1, 2, 3, IDEA, et cetera. You'll see those added on 8.10. Other than that, the resolutions are presented unchanged from the board work session.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Are there any comments or questions from the board? All right, seeing none, Mr. Ritchie, can you please call the roll?
Happy to. Ms. Bingham?
Yes.
Mr. Hurd?
Yes.
Ms. Dempsey?
Yes.
Ms. Ellicott?
Yes.
Ms. Link?
Yes.
Dr. Schroeder?
Yes.
Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Valdez?
Yes.
8 ayes. That motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. The chair will now entertain a motion to adopt the following three resolutions, 9.01 through 9.03. 9.01, authorizing the first renewal of a contract with Waste Management of Ohio to provide refuse removal services for all district facilities for the period July 1, 2022 through June 30, 2023 for the Cleveland Municipal School District locations in an amount not to exceed $639,600. 9.02, authorizing the Chief Executive Officer to enter into second renewal with Meritech, an authorized Kyocera dealer, to provide MFP, multifunctioning printer equipment, maintenance, centralized service, repair, and supplies on a cost per copy basis in an amount not to exceed $539,000 per year for the period of November 1st, 2022 through October 31st, 2023. And 9.03, authorizing the Chief Executive Officer, the Chief Financial Officer, and Board Chair to enter into contracts to purchase property to support Segment 8 projects in an amount not to exceed $500,000.
So moved.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon?
Thank you. These are our operations resolutions. These are presented unchanged from the board work session.
Any question or discussion? Yes, Dr. Thomas?
Thank you. Mr. Gordon, pertaining to 9.03, will we see the individual purchase agreements? Will we take any action, or does this give you blanket authority?
This gives me the authority to buy them quickly when they become available over the summer. I will certainly keep the board informed of any purchases we make, but you are actually granting the authority for us to move and move quickly.
Thank you.
Any other discussion or questions? Hearing none, Mr. Ritchie, can you please call the roll?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Bingham?
Yes.
Mr. Hurd?
Yes.
Ms. Dempsey?
Yes.
Ms. Ellicott?
Yes.
Ms. Link?
Yes.
Dr. Schreeder? Yes. Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Valdez?
Yes. 8
ayes, that motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. The chair will now entertain a motion to adopt the following two resolutions, 10.01 and 10.03, 10.01 and 10.02. 10.01, authorizing the issuance of a purchase order to Paths Program LLC to purchase various Paths program materials for classroom initiatives in the amount not to exceed $76,030. And 10.02, amending the Cleveland Municipal School District 2022-2023 school calendar to align bell times in support of encore expansion in pre-K through 8 schools.
So moved.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon?
Thank you. These are academic resolutions. They are presented unchanged from the board work session.
Any questions or discussion? Mr. Ritchie?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Bingham?
Yes.
Mr. Hurd?
Yes.
Ms. Dempsey?
Yes.
Ms. Ellicott?
Yes.
Ms. Link?
Yes.
Dr. Schreeder? Yes. Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Valdez?
Yes.
8 ayes, that motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. And the chair will now entertain a motion to adopt the following 8 resolutions, 11.01 through 11.08. 11.01, authorizing the employment of teaching, non-teaching, and school-based administrative staff. 11.02, authorizing the reclassification of employees. 11.03, accepting the retirements, resignations, and other separations of employees. 11.04, authorizing the issuance of limited contracts for differential positions and the payment of additional earned compensation to employees. 11.05, authorizing renewal and new administrator contracts. 11.06, authorizing the filing of complaints with the Ohio Board of Education against any Cleveland Municipal School District teacher, principal, or assistant principal who terminates their employment contract after July 10, 2022. 11.07, authorizing minimum wage increases for non-bargaining unit substitute positions. And 11.08, authorizing the Cleveland Municipal School District to enter into a contract with the James B. Oswald Company for employee health insurance benefits and related services in an amount not to exceed $1,003,124 for a 5-year period beginning July 1st, 2022.
So moved.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon?
Thank you. These are our talent resolutions. These resolutions are presented unchanged with the exception that the exhibits for hiring and reclassification have been updated to reflect the most current employee moves so that everybody's moving through the system as we enter into the summer.
Thank you. Yeah, Dr. Schreeder?
I'd just like to point out and ask Mr. Gordon, the number of separations, particularly teachers, have more than doubled over the course of this year. Is there anything that you can report based on national trends, how that compares? I mean, we went from 233 teachers separating in the last school year to this year 481 in our district. How does that compare nationally? Anything that you can offer here?
So nationally, we are seeing huge stop-outs of educators. Our doubling is actually fairly small compared to what many of my peers are seeing. They're seeing tripling and even larger numbers than that. Just as one example, I was on a call with one of my peers who a quarter of their principals left this year, 25%. So while it is concerning that we are seeing a pattern in the trend, it is smaller than what we're seeing in the national peer groups that we're engaged with.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, Mr. Ritchie?
Yes,
Can you
ma'am. Ms.
please
Bingham?
call the roll?
Oh, sorry. Ms. Bingham?
Yes.
Mr. Hurd?
Yes.
Ms. Dempsey?
Yes.
Ms. Ellicott?
Yes.
Ms. Link?
Yes.
Dr. Schreeder?
Yes.
Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Valdez?
Yes.
8 ayes, that motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. Is there any old business to come before the board? Is there any new business to come before the board? No? Okay. Because we will not be meeting in July, I want to, on behalf of the board and her colleagues, wish Dr. Thomas a happy birthday, which he will celebrate next month. The next Board of Education meeting will be a board business meeting on Tuesday, August 23rd at 6:30 p.m. at Robinson G. Jones School, 4550 West 150th Street. And so the chair will now entertain a motion that the board enter into executive session for the purposes of considering the employment of public employees, preparing for negotiations with public employees, concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment, and finally conferring with the attorneys concerning disputes involving the Board of Education that are the subject of pending or imminent court action.
So moved? Second.
Thank you. Mr. Ritchie, can you please call the roll?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Bingham.
Yes.
Mr. Hurd.
Yes.
Ms. Dempsey.
Yes.
Ms. Selikod.
Yes.
Ms. Link.
Yes.
Dr. Schroeder.
Yes.
Dr. Thomas.
Yes.
Ms. Valdez.
Yes.
8 ayes, that motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. We will now move into executive session. Following executive session, we will return to this room to conduct further business.
Mr. Ritchie, would you join us over here momentarily? And Ms. Pagan?
Don't leave.
But I think there's
Ms. Pagan, would you come forward and join us momentarily?
discipline. I don't know if anybody's coming to see us.
Well, she was walking this way. What happened to her? Louise.
Louise is there.
Oh, she's there. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay.
So we've got everybody.
Yeah, we do have.
Yep.
So the board is now back in public session. First item, the chair will now entertain a motion authorizing the suspension of a non-teaching employee, Sonora Cox.
So moved?
Thank you. Mr. Gordon?
This is a recommendation for a one-day suspension for violation of district policies, procedures, and rules.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Bingham?
Yes.
Mr. Hurd?
Yes.
Ms. Dempsey? Ms. Ellicott?
Yes.
Ms. Link?
Yes.
Dr. Schreeder?
Yes.
Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Valdez?
Yes.
8 ayes, that motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. The chair will now entertain a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing the suspension of a non-teaching employee, Angela Demerit.
So moved?
Thank you, Mr. Gordon.
This is a recommendation for a 5-day suspension for violation of district policies, procedures, and rules.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Bingham?
Yes.
Mr. Hurd?
Yes.
Ms. Dempsey? Ms. Ellicott?
Yes.
Ms. Link?
Yes.
Dr. Schreeder?
Yes.
Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Valdez?
Yes.
8 ayes, that motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. The chair will now entertain a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing the suspension of a non-teaching employee, Serena Ellis.
So moved?
Thank you, Mr. Gordon.
Thank you. This is a recommendation for a 10-day suspension for violation of district policies, procedures, and rules.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Bingham?
Yes.
Mr. Hurd?
Yes.
Ms. Dempsey? Ms. Ellicott? Ms. Link?
Yes.
Dr. Schreeder?
Yes.
Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Valdez?
Yes.
8 ayes, that motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. And the chair will now entertain a motion to adopt a resolution to approve negotiated agreements between the Laborers International Union of North America, Local 860, and the Board of Education of the Cleveland Municipal School District.
So moved?
Thank you, Mr. Gordon.
This is a recommendation to approve tentative agreements with the Local 860 that represents our assistant custodians, laborers, and mechanics. There are actually 2 agreements that are captured under one bargaining agreement. The union has ratified this, and I'm recommending approval from the board.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Any comments or questions from the board? Mr. Ritchie, one final time, can you please call the roll?
I'd be honored to. Ms. Bingham?
Yes.
Mr. Hurd?
Yes.
Ms. Dempsey? Ms. Ellicott?
Yes.
Ms. Link?
Yes.
Dr. Schreeder?
Yes.
Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
And Ms. Valdez.
Yes.
I'm happy to say that that motion passes.
Thank
8-0.
you, Mr. Ritchie.
Thank you.
As I mentioned earlier, our next regular board meeting will be a board business meeting on Tuesday, August 23rd at 6:30 p.m. at Robinson G. Jones School. The chair will now entertain a motion to adjourn this board business meeting.
So moved?
Thank you, Louise. Hearing no objection, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Good evening.
Yep. Have a good summer.
See you in August.
Thank